It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, from 2010 to 2020, many Detroiters had their homes foreclosed on. The city overassessed properties following the Great Recession. And over 2,000 Detroiters lost their homes because of illegal tax foreclosures. We'll discuss how they can reclaim their profits from selling their homes.
Plus, with ongoing conflicts across the globe, an influx of refugees and asylum seekers have arrived in Detroit over the past year. We'll talk with the head of Freedom House Detroit about the work they're doing to meet the need.
Also, Detroit artist Cary Longchamps spent his childhood exploring abandoned places in New Hampshire. We will now take a look at how abandoned places in Detroit have inspired his latest project. But first up on the show, building the highway system in this country was a federal undertaking, one of the most ambitious and impactful initiatives by the U.S. government. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 led to years of so-called urban renewal across the country. And that renewal meant removing blight and building new housing. It frequently happened in majority Black and poor communities. It led to the destruction of neighborhoods throughout Detroit. One example of this is the construction of I-375, which destroyed Black Bottom. And now the city plans to undo I-375 to reconnect parts of the city. And this may also happen in Midtown and downtown with the capping of I-75. But why are these projects happening now? What do they mean for Detroit, and how are they, are they an attempt to undo decades of so-called urban renewal? To discuss these things now, we have Jeff Horner here. Jeff is a professor in the Urban Studies and Planning Department at Wayne State University. Professor Horner, welcome to the Metro.
Well, thank you very much, Tia, and thank you, Robin.
Of course. So let's take a look back first. Historically, the Lodge, Southfield Freeway, 75, 375, 96, all in Detroit. The list can continue on, but what is the city's connection of these projects to the idea of urban renewal or, so-called urban renewal?
Well, many of the freeways that you see in downtown Detroit in the interstate system were funded and built in the late 50s and the early 1960s. And like many such freeways that cut through major American cities, they did tremendous damage. There was division of neighborhoods, including with I-375, as you mentioned, and certainly with I-75 and even with I-94. So there are very few freeways in Detroit that didn't displace people in businesses and so forth. And the city, along with state, resources, have been trying to maybe undo some of the mistakes that were made in the past 60 years or so.
Yeah, and the federal government is making a big push to rewrite some of the past wrongs from previous administrations. Most notably, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has helped spearhead the effort to help remove 375 in Detroit, as well as other highways across the country that destroyed many, many Black neighborhoods. So why is the federal government acting now?
I don't know the politics behind it.
I was going to say, in your opinion.
I think it has to do with who's in power at the political level. And if you have administrations that are pro-urban, you're going to have urban projects. You're going to have funding for such things. When you have someone like Secretary Buttigieg as Transportation Secretary who's going to push for reinvestment in our cities, cities are our engines of economic opportunity. So it all depends on who's in charge. That's where the funding comes from. These projects are very expensive.
And last Friday, we spoke with Downtown Detroit Partnership CEO Eric Larson and the city's Director of Planning, Antoine Bryant, about the I-75 CAP project that's being proposed. A bunch of visioning sessions have happened already. So here's what Eric had to say about the proposed CAP.
It's an opportunity to really start to think about how we reconnect our communities, how we repair some of the damage that was caused back in the 50s and 60s, but most importantly, how we can lean into the growth and the momentum that is taking place both in the core as well as throughout the city.
And what was your initial reaction to the I-75 capping project when you heard about the idea?
Oh, I think any time that that steps are taken to mitigate the intrusion of urban freeways is a good thing. However, given what I was saying about expenses, you have to be really very careful where you're going to spend your resources, as it were. But the area, as proposed by the Downtown Development Partnership and the city, I heard Mr. Bryant on the interview last week. will certainly lessen the effect of I-75, and it'll allow more connectivity between the entertainment district and the adjoining neighborhood, the new adjoining neighborhood that's there.
And, I think about other cities, major cities across the country, and I've been in Atlanta a few times, more than a few times, and I think about how their entertainment district is and how there are ways to go around some of the freeways and some of the roadways there with caps and different things that we see. So I'm thinking about some of the things that you were talking about as well. 696, which was something that was extremely important to you. You said as you were growing up, you saw the 696 and the cap there. And for myself, being a former traffic reporter, I often talked about I-696 in a particular area where that cap is, and we see the leaking coming down as well. So when we talk about 696 cap compared to what we could be seeing at 75 in Detroit, what are some of the things that we could see happening there?
Well, the 696 cap, I don't know if we have time to go into the history of it, but
just a little bit, yeah.
It was really driven by the Orthodox Jewish community in that part of Oak Park and Southfield. Wow. And there's actually 3 of them. There's, I believe, 2 in Oak Park and 1 in Southfield. And 696, the construction of it was held up for a long time because the community didn't want it.
Wow.
And so the ability to be able to walk to temple, to get your kids to shul, that was all affected by 696 coming in. And so I guess in keeping with the spirit of reconnecting communities, that's exactly what those plazas are about. And I don't know in your time as a traffic reporter if you were ever actually on those plazas, but they're fabulous.
They are.
You wouldn't know that there's cars, zinging by your right underneath your feet.
No.
And other than the noise, they're still very noisy. You can hear all that, but that's a major freeway. But I think they've done a very good job of mitigating the intrusion of freeways through neighborhoods.
Yeah, and then once again, when you see it compared to something like 75, and you talked about the economic benefits there that were lost due to it. So we see a cap there in 75 connecting downtown to midtown, not only the economic benefits, but let's just talk about the historical benefits there and that reconnecting those communities that have been lost.
Well, I was a little bit torn on this one as to what to say, but you're not so much reconnecting communities there. I think you're certainly making the entertainment district a lot more achievable by walking, and that's a laudable goal, no question. But the old neighborhood that was there was mostly the Brewster projects.
Yeah.
And when I-75 went through there, that cut off the folks in the Brewster project from jobs downtown and such. So I think it's important to recognize that if you're going to call the program Reconnecting Communities, you have to be specific about which communities that you're reconnecting.
Yes, this is the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Tia Graham. Sitting across from Robin Vincent, we're chatting with Wayne State Professor Jeff Horner, and we're learning more about the attempts by all levels of government to undo parts of our highway system and reconnect communities. So just listening to what you just said, what does it mean to truly reconnect communities? What would that look like?
Well, let me give you another example involving I-75.
Oh, yes.
So over on the west side of I-75, where it extends north for a while off the Ambassador Bridge, that segment of I-75 actually divided in half southwest Detroit, and it prevented a lot of parishioners from being able to go worship at St. Anne's. And I say after we get this project done, we take a look at reconnecting that community over there. Now, there was a pedestrian bridge that was built a few years ago with the new bridge project, but that is just as detrimental to neighborhoods as was the original segment of I-75 that we're talking about today. Wow.
And once again, you're bringing so much knowledge and so much context to things that we just aren't aware of in the city of Detroit, especially just now learning 75, cutting through Southwest Detroit as well, something that I honestly never really thought about. So, thinking about the things that the residents are going through, thinking about some of the other things that we're seeing, as we talk about parks and businesses or something else, when we talk about that cap, what type of new things that can we see other than businesses and things like that? Like, what are some of the other ways that we can see these caps being used? I mean, I've seen examples of other places across the country. I mean, just beautiful, lush gardens in the middle of urban settings. So what can we see here?
Well, this isn't hard. I think the city did a great job with Campus Martius, and how they took that ratty old park. I'm sorry, I went down there a lot as a kid, and nobody was out there but pigeons. And so the city got it right, and they took the time to do it. They just put a lot of green space out there.
Yeah.
And of course, in the winter they've got a skating rink. It's fabulous. It's fabulous. There's no reason something like that couldn't be done here.
Exactly. And there are a lot of construction. There's going to be a lot of construction when you talk about capping a project or capping project in general. What are you most concerned about as it relates to the effect it will have on residents, businesses, and people trying to navigate the city during that time?
Well, there are several things here. First of all, this is not going to be just a weekend project. From what little I know about the engineering of these things, it's going to be rerouting I-75, I'm guessing. But you have a really special problem with the freeway. And if this project still allows as much traffic on the service drive, you may get into trouble because people are going to use that as a road still. They're going to be driving along there, and that is something that may prevent pedestrians from being able to get around, especially if there's stuff going on in the in the entertainment district. Pardon me. Yeah. So. You got to be careful with these things. You have to plan them very carefully. You can't just model it after what they did in Dallas or something else. It's all very sensitive to local conditions.
Yeah, Dallas was exactly the example. Is absolutely gorgeous.
Professor Horner, I want to chime in about your teaching at Wayne State. It makes me think back to one of my favorite classes there. It was an urban planning class that examined how other Rust Belt cities had risen from the ashes and what Detroit needed to do to follow suit. Now, that was years ago when Detroit was really struggling, and it has me wondering about the ways courses have changed in your department, given how Detroit is changing with projects like this. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so we've got this new faculty member. His name is Eric Bettis. He's a fabulous professor, and he teaches a class in sustainable cities. And that's a relatively new class. I think our department's been talking about doing it for a while, and it's been very, very heavily subscribed, and Professor Bettis is a real winner. So that's at least one of them. I teach primarily undergraduate classes. Okay. So the most of the newer classes are at the graduate level, but that's the one that comes to mind for me. I'm
guessing, though, that you've had to revise some of the ways that you're talking about Detroit versus a decade ago, right?
Oh, yeah. So much is happening in Detroit. Cities are these very dynamic places, and I was asked to write a textbook about 6 years ago, and now I'm being asked to write another one on Detroit.
Wow.
And there's so much new scholarship now that I'd like to capture and use in this textbook. So there's a lot happening now. I was talking with Alex beforehand about the new changes in the tax reversion process. And, you have to stay on top of these things from a policy perspective. There's all sorts of new housing being built throughout the city.
Right.
City Council is working very closely with developers and changing ordinances to encourage that.
Seems like an exciting time to be studying urban planning in Detroit from a student's perspective, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I completely agree. And there's so many opportunities here.
Yeah.
There are so many things I could look into if I like to, but who's got time, right? We've got 24 hours a day.
Not enough.
Not enough. Jeff Horner is a professor in the Urban Studies and Planning Department at Wayne State University. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The third I-75 CAP visioning session is happening tomorrow at the MSU Detroit Center from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Robin.
Tia.
Yes.
That was, can I say your name 3 times?
Well, I don't know if you want it to be like a Candyman thing. Come out of
I don't.
It's Halloween.
Let's take that back. I realize for you as a native Detroiter that conversation really resonates. I'm wondering, what were the conversations that you had at home about Detroit and the freeways?
Yeah, growing up, I didn't know I held all of this history and all this knowledge in my brain, just learning these little tidbits as I went along with my dad and my mom, of course. But my dad is a native Detroiter, grew up here, and, not only experiencing the rebellion of 67, but experiencing 96 and the Lodge going directly through the neighborhoods that he grew up in. It's just, I always think to myself, what does it mean to have a place in a space in a particular area when it's no longer there and it's not coming back?
What does your dad think about this project?
He absolutely loves it. He, once again, he grew up here. He experienced when downtown was booming, and he experienced when things were booming, and then he saw the law, and then he saw it come back, and he's seeing it come back now. So he's super excited to see this. And as well, his Lions are winning, so.
That's it.
I know, right? What else do you need?
More than winning.
What else do you need? What do we have coming up?
Coming up, we'll discuss how over 2,000 Detroiters who lost their homes because of illegal tax foreclosures could reclaim the profits from the sale of those homes.
Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. The Great Recession hurt many Americans, and the most vulnerable people were hurt the most.
That was true for a lot of Detroiters. The fallout from the economic downturn led to the city over-assessing homes, tens of thousands of homes that were overtaxed by $600 million from 2010 to 2017.
A lot of those homes were sold, and some made profits, but a decision by the state Supreme Court this past summer marks a change.
It means that over 2,000 Detroit homeowners could recover some of the profits made on their foreclosed homes.
Alex Alsip studies and writes about housing. He explained this issue and created a map to help people recover profits made from their foreclosed homes in his Substack called The Chargeback.
Alex, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. So, the city illegally inflated the value of many Detroit homes. As a result, it overtaxed Detroit homeowners by at least $600 million, leading to 1 out of every 3 homes going through property tax foreclosure. That's mind-boggling. So there were a lot of people who qualified for property tax exemptions that would have protected them from foreclosure. What was the damage from city residents not getting tax exemptions?
Yeah, that's right. So between 2010, 2008, and 2019, probably something like 20 to 25,000 Detroit homeowners lost their homes to property tax foreclosure. And the vast majority of them likely would have qualified for the city of Detroit's 100% property tax exemption, which you are eligible for by reason of poverty. And the vast majority of homeowners would have qualified for that. As a result, their homes were tax foreclosed. They went into tax foreclosure auctions run by Wayne County. And in those auctions, one of 3 things happens. Either a home doesn't sell at all, it sells for less than the property tax debt owed, or it sells for more than the property tax debt owed. And it's that last scenario that the Michigan Supreme Court's ruling in Schaefer v. Kent County a few months ago applies to. They ruled that their earlier finding in the 2020 Raffaelli case, which said that moving forward, county treasurers could not keep the profits generated from the sale of properties in tax foreclosure auctions, known as windfall profits. They can't keep those windfall profits. There needs to be a way for the former owner to recover those profits. And the court's ruling a few months ago said that also applies retroactively. Mm-hmm. So now going back to properties that were lost as early as the 2015 auction. There's a limitation because of Michigan's statute of limitations. So unfortunately, windfall profits prior to 2015 can't be recovered. But between 2015 and 2019, property owners who lost their properties to tax foreclosure, the properties sold at auction for more than the tax debt owed, that money can now be recovered. And between 2015 and 2019, I found there were around 11,000 Detroit homeowners who lost their homes. And of that 11,000, it's about 22%, around 2,400, appeared to sell at auction for more than the tax debt owed, generating a windfall profit that can now be recovered.
And Alex, why weren't there more property tax exemptions offered by the city of Detroit?
They were very difficult to apply for up until around 2016, 2017. There was a lawsuit. The ACLU sued the city of Detroit for denial of due process because the exemption was so difficult to apply for that it effectively wasn't available to citizens. I think up until 2014-15, to apply for the property tax exemption, you had to physically go to City Hall and fill out an application for the application to then be mailed to you, at which point you would go through onerous paperwork. You'd have to get it notarized and then returned. And so effectively, you had people that just couldn't apply. I think at that point, the city was probably granting around 3,000, 3,500 exemptions a year, and probably 10 times that, 35,000, 40,000 homeowners actually qualified for the exemption.
Wow.
It's gotten much better. Now we're at more like 20,000, 22,000 exemptions that are granted each year. The process has gotten much, much easier. It's also retroactive now, so it will wipe out the back taxes that are owed, not just the current year's taxes. But certainly middle of the last decade, it was very difficult to apply for.
So there were a lot of barriers to overcome.
Yes.
Now, Alex, in July, the Michigan State Supreme Court said local governments must pay back profits from foreclosed homes. No one has recovered money yet. What's the soonest people might be able to claim those profits?
That's correct. And there's a process associated with the recovery of these windfall profits as well. The first step is that you have to file a notice of intent to claim profits with the Wayne County Treasurer in Detroit. Of course, it's with the Wayne County Treasurer. This applies to any county in Michigan, but it's with your local county treasurer. That form needs to be notarized. The county treasurer will then notify you if there are windfall profits to claim and how much they are. And then at the moment, the next step after that, which would be sometime next summer, essentially, a motion needs to be filed with the Wayne County Circuit Court. Hopefully that doesn't remain a motion that needs to be formally filed. Hopefully that also becomes a form. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case or not right now, but at the moment, my understanding is that you'll have to file a motion with the Wayne County Circuit Court, and then ultimately they will rule on what the windfall profits are that need to be returned. So the earliest that people could expect to get money back is probably towards the end of next year or something like that. That's my understanding of the process right now.
Okay, and Alex, there are 2,400 former Detroit homeowners that could collect money from Wayne County. Where did you come up with this number?
Yeah, it's my estimate based on data, city assessment data from each of 2015 through 2019, joined to tax foreclosure auction data that the company I work at, Regrid, has collected for 15 plus years now. So even if homeowners lost their homes to tax foreclosure auctions, it's very unlikely that they would know if it sold for more than the tax debt owed or not. And so what I was doing was looking at where are homes that had principal residence exemptions that went into tax foreclosure, or even if they didn't have a principal residence exemption, it was owned by an individual and the tax bill was sent to the home, which can also be an indication of home ownership. And then where are those properties that sold at auction for more than the tax debt owed, and what is that difference? What's the difference between the tax debt owed and the final sale price at auction? And that's that's indicative of the windfall profits.
Thank you.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Robin Vincent with Tia Graham. We're speaking with Alex Alsop. He created a map on his Substack of the profits made from sales on foreclosed homes before 2020. He also has a guide to help former residents reclaim those profits. Now, Alex, how can people apply to reclaim those profits made on the sale of previously foreclosed homes? What do they have to do exactly?
So the process is all run by the Wayne County Treasurer. You can go to the Wayne County Treasurer's website, and the notice of intent to claim windfall profits form on their website. My understanding is that they have, I think, been reaching out as well proactively to people that they believe may be able to collect windfall profits, which is great. And so the first step is completing that form, which needs to be notarized and returned to the Wayne County Treasurer by March 31st of next year. If people need help completing that form, I know the United Community Housing Coalition is able to help people through their tax hotline, which the phone number for which is on the post I published on my Substack, which you can find at detroit.substack.com.
And before we let you go, Alex, was there anything surprising when you reviewed the data on homes that were sold and made a profit after they went through foreclosure? Was that shocking to you?
So it wasn't so surprising. It was basically what I expected, but I think it was what was stark to see was, collectively those 2,400 homeowners might be able to collect about $20 million in windfall profits, but the present day value of the homes that they lost, very conservatively, is around $120 million. And so, even that $20 million is a very far cry from anything close to making those people whole for what they lost.
Indeed. Alex Alsip writes a lot about housing in Detroit on his Substack called The Chargeback. Alex, thanks for joining us on the Metro. One more time, what's the name of that Substack?
The Chargeback at detroit.substack.com.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Alex. Coming up, we'll talk with the head of Freedom House Detroit about the challenges that come with assisting a big influx of refugees and asylum seekers who've recently arrived in Detroit.
Welcome back to the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. Across the globe, 1.5% of the entire world's population has been forcibly displaced. That's according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. The UN says this is nearly double the number of displaced people a decade ago. Now, over the last year in Detroit, a few local organizations have been working really around the clock to try and meet this growing need. They support people who've often fled their home countries due to violence, civil unrest, or desperate economic circumstances. So what are the challenges in meeting this growing need and in providing safety and stability? What's the path for forcibly displaced people to begin putting the pieces back together? And what does that look like in Metro Detroit, a place with plenty of challenges of its own? Elizabeth Orozco Vasquez leads Freedom House Detroit. Her organization provides refugees and asylum seekers with everything from basics like food, clothing, and community housing to legal services, access to medical care, and job assistance. Elizabeth, thank you for joining the Metro. So could you start by characterizing the need that you're seeing? How acute is it?
Well, I do want to say we don't have the same need that we're seeing in New York, Colorado, California, and Texas, but we do still have a need here. We tend to be a secondary city for a lot of new arrivals. And what that means is that they've probably already arrived at one of these other major cities and then find that there's not much there for them just because there's just such a huge need there. It's overpopulated. And so they come to places like Detroit where they hear, oh, there might be work there. And so just to give you kind of an idea of what it looks like for us. So for Freedom House, we're seeing those that really have no other place to go, no other resources, right? There's no family, there's no friends. And so back in August of 2023, we were serving about 60 people at one time. Currently, we're serving between 230 and 250 people at one time.
Wow.
So if you can imagine that massive growth, it's huge, right? And the need is still there. Every week we have about 10 to 15 people we have to turn away every week. So again, if you can imagine that. And so
every week?
Every week, yeah. So when we're full, we're full. And unfortunately, at that point, we have to turn people away. So we are the only community, we call it community housing, since people stay with us a lot longer than you would at a typical shelter. So really the only community housing in Michigan for this population. So again, if you can imagine, in the entirety of Michigan, we are the only place that people can come to seek services like that.
Wow.
That's not to say those are the only new arrivals that are arriving to Detroit. There are those that have established communities here.
Sure.
Or that are finding other places to stay. So we hear stories of people staying in basements together on mattresses, right? We hear people staying on couches, staying with other migrants or immigrants that have already established themselves here in the city and in the community. So it's they're everywhere, right? We just happen to see those that they have no other choice but come to us.
Let's personalize some of these folks that you're talking about. What countries are they coming from right now? And what are some of the circumstances that are pushing them to leave?
Yeah, so currently, if I'm remembering the stat correctly, we have over 30 countries staying at Freedom House Detroit. And so we have people from predominantly right now, it changes depending on what's happening in the world, right? We've been around for 41 years now. And so as things happen in the world, we see different populations. But currently, right now, we're seeing mostly Venezuelans, Colombians, Mauritanians, Senegalese, Haitians, and some Central Americans as well.
And we know they're often escaping major upheaval and trauma. And Detroit feels much calmer in comparison, but we know living here comes with a lot of challenges too. Talk about some of the ones that present more considerable hurdles for folks and how you try to address those.
Oh, wow.
A lot.
Think of it this way. Anything that you need as a human being, as a person to establish yourself in a community, that's a hurdle for our clients. So if you come with children, it's finding a school, finding a school that also has English as a second language, right? So even that, the majority of Detroit it's not like a New York, it's not like a California, right? So those are big barriers for our clients because we don't have tons of immigrants coming in those areas like the East Side or outside of the Hamtramcks, outside of the Dearborn, outside of Southwest Detroit, and so that's a big hurdle for our clients. Also, work authorization. So many people think that people are coming here and they're going to take all of the available jobs. Well, they can't. They actually don't have work authorization when they first come here. So they also don't have access to mainstream services like Medicaid or like food assistance, things like that. There is really no way to survive, which oftentimes makes them very vulnerable to sex and work trafficking. And we actually see that a lot. So, I mean, anything that you currently see, there's a barrier there for them to succeed.
And I realize that you have a background working in housing and homelessness services, and so this feels a lot different than what someone could access at a homeless shelter.
Absolutely. Our homeless shelters are, they have so much to handle. Right. There's a lot to handle there between, vets with PTSD, with, people with mental, health disabilities, drug addiction. There's just so much there. Yep. To add this different layer of complexity on them, to be honest, it's not right. It would not be fair to them. It would be meaning, now having to have your staff be, learn how to use translation apps and things like that, and that's a whole nother layer of services. They're not prepared to also understand the intricacies of the legal system, right? So, okay, no, you can't sign this person up for mainstream services. That would be against the law. we can't put them into work right away. They need a place to stay for a lot longer than you would a shelter. And so it's very, very different. And actually, I'm very proud to say that inside of the city of Detroit, the homeless system as well as Freedom House, we work very closely together and have been doing so for the past 20 years, where, they'll refer people to us, we'll refer people to them, but we work very closely understanding that those are two very different needs, but two very different populations, but very much the same need, which is housing.
Sure. This is the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Robin Vincent alongside Tia Graham. We're speaking with Elizabeth Orozco Vasquez of Freedom House Detroit about the increasing numbers of displaced people arriving in Detroit from other countries. Elizabeth, now we must acknowledge the upcoming election here. Former President Donald Trump has been campaigning heavily against immigration, even using some really ugly language to describe immigrants. Meanwhile, Harris's campaign has been softer, but not super pro-immigration. She's signaled that she'll be tough on the border. How does the vitriolic or even just tough rhetoric on immigration affect your work?
Oh, it's so tough. My staff is pretty tough, I will say, but I would be naive to say that it does not affect their work every day, to come in and know that what you're hearing out in the public, or even our clients, what they're hearing out in the public is very much against what they are doing and what they have decided to, put their energy and their career towards. And so it is very difficult. We also start to plan for the worst, right? You're like, okay, so after the election, we need to, prepare for, hey, we may not have access to certain, already limited services. We may need to see who's coming up to our building, because we've already had people come up to our building and take pictures and, send threatening letters, things like that. So it's already not the greatest. But what I will say is that the thing that we focus on the most is trying to think about how do we make those community connections, because those are going to be the most important. One thing I think that people don't understand is that this population, a lot of times they, in politics, they try to pit the underserved against this particular population, saying, well, we're not even getting services. Why should we give them services? What I try to say is, don't think of it that way. You guys are the same people. And essentially, if one gets services, if we get better schooling for this population, that means we all get better schooling. If we work together, that means we all get better, employment services. That means that we all get better housing services. We're all part of the underserved community, and pitting ourselves against one another or having others pit us against one another is just not productive. So hopefully we can keep it that way on the community level, and not have to worry so much of it on the federal level.
Elizabeth Orozco Vasquez leads Freedom House Detroit. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining the Metro.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
This is the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. Coming up, we'll learn about the unique way artist Cary Longchamps is bringing his work to Detroit neighborhoods. Stay right there.
Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. While Detroit's abandoned houses are dwindling, they still dot many neighborhoods in the city. Detroit-based artist Cary Longchamps spent his childhood exploring abandoned places in New Hampshire. His latest project is making Longchamps feel like a kid again, and also exploring public art in a new way in Detroit. Longchamps has been placing public art in abandoned buildings while boarding them up in Detroit's North Corktown neighborhood. WDET's Jack Philbrandt recently spent a night running around that community with the artist. Jack, welcome to this side of the show.
Tia and Robin, thank you for having me on this side of the show. I'm so excited to bring you guys this experience that I had with Cary. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining the lighter side.
Yeah, you seem lit right now. I love it. So, Jack, how did you find out about Cary Longchamps and his vigilante artwork in the first place?
I do not know if other people are followers of the Detroit Reddit channel, but
guilty.
It is something that I learned so much about when it comes to Detroit. And one of those things was Cary Longchamps and his light installations. Somebody had seen these in their East Side neighborhood, was wondering who was putting them up, posted it on the Detroit Reddit, and from there it led me to Cary's page and seeing these amazing light pieces that he's been putting up in abandoned buildings in the North Corktown neighborhood and the East Side.
Can I just say that the Detroit subreddit really captures the cultural zeitgeist of our city, I think, and I think we have like a show in the making here.
Amanda LeClaire, WDET's Amanda LeClaire, is one of the, like, she talks about it often. So yeah. I know about Detroit's Reddit because of Amanda LeClaire. So shout out to Amanda for keeping me in the loop.
Amanda.
So Jack, Cary's work is called the VHF Project. Can you talk about what this artwork is, like VHF?
Yeah, so this project, it really is thinking of galleries in a new way. And one of the new ways that he is thinking about galleries is by creating these posters, putting them up in windows, and then at night there's a solar light that shines on these posters so you can actually see them at night, and they glow up in red, and they're quite the sight.
I love that. I wish we had some photos right now that I can just look at. But I'm just thinking about some of Cary's work. I'm assuming it's relatively cheap to buy and make.
Yeah, so chipboard for the stencil, butcher paper to kind of as a light diffuser in front of the window, and then a $20 solar lamp that he's getting off Amazon. There's a sensor that he hooks up on the side of the house, and then it's wired through the house to the light. So all the electricity that's being used is coming from these solar sensors and lights that are on the side of the house.
All right,
we have a clip from Cary talking about how these work.
And then you'll follow the line, and that goes out to a solar panel that sits on the outside of the house. And that's really it. I mean, the stencil is made out of chipboard. We got butcher paper. We have a $17 landscape light from Amazon. You know, it's not anything crazy extensive, but it does have a big impact.
And when I hear that, Jack, I think about number one, how you can make beautiful things with almost nothing, relatively nothing, which is great. So what is the meaning behind the term VHF, or Very High Frequency Project?
Yeah, so VHF, as you said, it stands for Very High Frequency. This is a radio channel that first responders use, people like police, the Coast Guard. But before cell phones, neighborhood watch programs were also using these to monitor their streets and communicate with their neighbors. So the image and figure that has become a part of the VHF project comes from these neighborhood watch program. And here's a clip of Cary talking about his VHF memories.
So back in the day, when there used to be these neighborhood watch community groups, there would be the old guy on the block with his ham radio, a CB radio, and they would have a VHF frequency picked out, and they could talk back and forth with each other.
And once again, when I hear that, number one, the ham radio, I think I know a few folks here who still use those radios, so that's very interesting to hear brought up again. But how is he using Detroit's abandoned properties as part of his work?
So yeah, this is really about Cary reliving his childhood, kind of getting back to his roots, but also thinking about abandoned houses, as we've talked about earlier in the show, just how they are unsafe eyesores, and how he can kind of change that doing this art. So one of the things that Cary does when it comes to abandoned houses is he's going in, he's setting up his light, but on the way out, he's also boarding it up and making sure that not only people can't mess with his artwork, but get into unsafe structures that are still in a lot of neighborhoods in Detroit.
Yes, indeed. Here's Cary chatting about the homes.
At a point, I just kind of got bored with just going in and taking pictures. I'm like, I want to try something different. And how could we turn this space into, an art installation?
And this is really cool that he's finding these places to just beautify, but I don't even think those are his true intentions with it. But this is the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Tia Graham alongside Robin Vincent and Metro producer Jack Philbrandt, and we're chatting about the work of artist Cary Longchamps in Detroit's North Corktown neighborhood.
Now, Jack, who exactly is the star of the VHF Project?
So Cary is definitely the brain behind the project, but the face really is Boris the Burglar. And I'm sure this is an icon that many people in Detroit have seen, but it's that menacing figure, his collar popped, and on these Neighborhood Watch stickers. I had one on the corner of my window, and it's something that I have always seen and something that Cary has also always seen.
Yes, here's Cary talking about Boris the Burglar.
I remember seeing him on street signs when I was a kid. I grew up in the 80s. I was on my bike all the time. And, you know, the big thing back then was get home before the streetlights come on, or the boogeyman will get you. The boogeyman, it could be the Sandman, it could be anybody. But I always thought that Boris the Burglar was my version of the boogeyman. So I just thought it would be kind of fun to play with that image and kind of just turn that irrational fear on its head.
Confession, I thought that Boris was wearing a cape.
Which I love.
I'm sure I'm not the only one, I hope. What's the big mystery about Boris the Burglar and his design?
So I took the other perspective, Robin, and I've always thought it was his chin, Boris the Burglar, but
a very pronounced chin.
Yeah, and this question has kind of come up throughout history of Boris the Burglar. Is it his collar popped? Is it his chin? And Cary helped us get to the bottom and answer this question.
The big question is it his collar or is it his mouth? And it is, in fact, his collar. But I can see how it could be confused, and it does look like a big, giant, goofy cartoon mouth.
I always thought it was a collar. I always thought the collar was hiding his face. I knew something was nefarious going on exactly. He's like, I got the collar and I'm looking. So I always thought that. I love that you thought it was a cape, though, like Batman's coming to rob you.
Or Batman and Robin.
Oh, coming. Don't get me giggling in here, Robin. So, Jack, why did Cary choose light to use in his work?
So it's not just Boris the Burglar that he's lighting up, but he also has a crosswalk sign that he's used the same technology to light up. So at the Humboldt Forest Graffiti Park, there's this object there, and same technology, same sensors on the side that really makes it shine at night.
I pulled up, I'm like, what's up, guys? They're like, we don't know, we're trying to figure out where this thing came from because it doesn't belong here. And, you know, we don't know what's going on with it. And he's like, but we got to replace this pole. So we're about to take it down and it's going to go in my man cave. And I was like, yeah, no, that's mine and it's coming home with me.
So this is Cary talking about how he literally saved this crosswalk sign from DTE workers in order to keep the art public for the public.
Oh,
he pulled up and they were getting ready to take it down and take it home because it wasn't one of their signs, but it was Cary's. And you can see it at Humboldt Forest Graffiti Park still.
I love that so much. Jack, thank you so much for bringing us the story about artist Cary Longchamps in the VHF Project. You can see Cary Longchamps' first solo show at Corktown Studios. It's coming in January. Of course, we will keep you all up to date. Jack, see you on the other side of the window.
See you guys later.
Thanks, Jack. That's the Metro for Monday, October 28th. The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt. Additional support from Dorothy Jones. Our engineer is Connor Anderson. Music by Sam Bobian and Will Sessions.
You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. The show is also on YouTube if you like listening that way.
The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University.
If you like what you hear and you want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate. This is WDET, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Robin and I return tomorrow.
See you then.